Hello, BookTube. Well, as you can see, I have a guest. This is Hannah from Hannah's Books. This is waved to my imaginary BookTube friends. Uh, Hannah has a fantastic BookTube channel. I will link it down below. All of you already know about it anyway. She's one of them that are deep thinkers, which you will not find any deep thinking on this channel. But we're gonna see. I'm gonna see if I can keep up in this conversation, which is spurred on by a blight on the face of BookTube. I think we could agree. All of us remember what BookTube was like before Joe Spivey and now after Joe Spivey. That's how we date things. Joe Spivey is a wonderful channel as well, and he did a video recently about his experiences book reviewing.
It's a
Uh,
great
I'll leave
video.
that linked as well. It's also wonderful. He's just starting out in the book reviewing world. I know to him it must seem like he's been trying to break into that larger world forever, but he is just starting out. Uh, he talked about his experiences, of course, in connection with something that you're connected with as well, which is a little online journal, a little online review space called Open Letters Review, uh, where Hannah and I are both editors, and where you are welcome to try your hand at formal book reviewing, which is not common, right? That's your own. You would share that experience with Joe. Is that
Oh, utterly.
open
It's
an
just an
open carpet?
amazing opportunity to break into book reviewing, which is unless you have pretty serious connections with some sort of paper or journal, it's not easy to get a gig doing book reviews.
Yeah, you've
Letters Review is the most open place I've ever seen.
I mean, you have books to your credit, academic credentials to your credit, a publication history to your credit, inside and outside of Open Letters Review, and well, just your own experiences. How easy do you think it would be for you to get a review in the Post, in the Washington Post?
All but I mean, it's been impossible for me so far. I haven't tried tremendously hard yet.
Well, I'm not. I mean, you wouldn't try tremendously hard. They're
It's a
they're
little different
openly
now. Yeah.
openly pro-fascist, so you wouldn't want to run. You wouldn't want your name connected with.
Although their book pages are not yet. So, um, but yeah, I before Open Letters Review, I had done, numerous book reviews, but they were all for academic books in academic presses. And the process is a little bit different. Not completely. But yeah, going in and saying, here, I have this list of book reviews I've made would not have made any difference at the Post, or even at something more small scale that I probably could have at somewhere like the Washington Independent Review of Books, but even places like what's the one in New York City that's often thought of as kind of a small scale. And I got no responses when I when I uh, pitched them.
I don't know which venue you're talking about specifically.
Uh,
You know that
Brooklyn Rail, that's not what it's called, is it? Brooklyn Rail?
rail, yeah, that's
Brooklyn
probably
Rail.
it. And
Um,
unfortunately, as I've railed, no pun intended, as I've railed on this channel before, no response has become
right.
the new not interested.
Absolutely.
That have had editors tell me
Yep.
that if I don't respond, it means I'm not interested. And I try to tell them, no, if you don't respond, it means you're an unprofessional lout.
Yeah. Just have a standard little thing where you
Yeah,
know, push copy and send it. No, thank you. You know?
right, right. But it doesn't happen. So the open door policy at Open Letters is a little unusual.
Yeah.
Uh, but I had to smile a little when you mentioned that the process is a little slightly different with academic presses. Because in Joe Spivey's video, one of the many things that he said that I agree with, I've agreed with the whole video, basically. Don't tell him that, but one of the things that he said was, well, basically paraphrasing, there are all sorts because you'd have to paraphrase Joe Spivey. There's no way you could quote him. You pretty much have to paraphrase him. Paraphrasing, he said there are all sorts of things that your review can be. It can be wrong factually. It can be late or early, but the one thing it must not be is dull. And of course, any of you who have ever read Joe Spivey's own reviews on Open Letters Review or anywhere else will know he is not a dull writer
Never
at all.
dull. Right.
But I was thinking about an exchange that you and I had. just recently about academic presses where you almost feel like you want to say, there is something missing from this piece. I mean, it's good and it's conscientious and it's timely and it's comprehensive, but it's a little dull.
Yes. Yeah, I think book reviews are intended there to be i- to point out whether books have used proper sourcing material or good arguments, but they're not for entertainment in the way that when we um, are writing for Open Letters Review, to a degree, we're trying to tip off readers to books that might entertain them or make them um, interested in some other way, but also to just entertain them
Right.
to a degree with what we write.
I
And I'm far less entertaining than you and Joe.
well, but more informative. So it evens out. But I the canard thrown at Open Letters Review from time to time over the last few years has been that we'll publish anything, and those people are welcome to look at my inbox because there are plenty of things that we don't. If you send me something and you say I'd love to get into book reviewing, and you send me an utterly lifeless book report, I mean, the ethos at Open Letters Review is different slightly than it was at Open Letters Preview, predecessor Open Letters Monthly. At Open Letters Review, the work largely reflects on you, not the journal. You're the one who's going to be flogging it around on your social media. You're the one who's going to be notifying people that it exists, which means if you write something dumb or dull, it's largely going to be on your lookout. But I'm not going to run something that is just lifeless. I'm going to try not to.
Right. And for people who are interested in writing for Open Letters Review, the taking advantage of Steve's amazing ability to help you with editing
As I
is
don't
something
usually.
I highly recommend.
There's two tracks you can do, right? If you send me a piece, my first reaction for Open Letters Review, not for Open Letters Monthly, for Open Letters Review, my first reaction is going to be, well, it's got two eyes and two ears, and it walks on its own. And if this is your final version of it, then we'll run it. There's nothing wrong with it, so we'll run it. That's track number one. Almost everybody takes track number one. Track number two is for me to do line edits on your piece, which track number one is easy because I can just check the thing to make sure that it's what the old newspaper world referred to as good copy.
Well,
Track number two brings to bear 60 years of editing. So it will work over your piece. Most people don't, they don't want that. I don't think they do.
although if you if you want the best prose coming out under your name, then having someone else, so especially someone who knows how to write, um, help you look at it afresh can make so much difference. And not
Well,
just for that piece, but for all future pieces
what
too.
about your own experience with outside the academic world, with figuring out what a book review actually is? Way too many people think that it is just a book report.
Yeah.
I've tried to say over and over again, it's a piece of your own writing with your name on it. And it's not just a book report, but it's also not just a subjective reaction to a book. It's something else.
Yes. Yeah. So Joe, I think, said that it was both making that it's thinking critically, but also sort of summarizing. I think that's what he said. And it seems to me that there are a couple of extra things as well. And one, as you've already said, is to make it entertaining in itself. And certainly Joe would agree with that. And then for me, I also think that there's a certain amount of analysis that happens in it. It's not just thinking critically, it's trying to figure out what the book itself is trying to do and how it's trying to do that, and not necessarily judging it for that at first, just trying to break it apart and see how it does that. So I think in my reviews at least, and maybe it's because of my academic background, but I think that that idea of giving a basic picture of what the subject matter is, and then a basic picture of what its background is, what, as Joe said, whose shoulders it's standing on. Um, but then also thinking about what it's trying to do and then whether it succeeds at that, I think is all sort
Yeah,
of.
the analyzing the shoulders part is that is typically the characteristic of much longer pieces. right? In the London Review of Books or a long piece in the New Yorker, you are supposed to go into every novel that this person has written before and all
Right.
the different themes and recurring locations and whatnot. Whereas in a shorter piece, the open letters pieces are what I like to think of as newspaper reviews. They're basically 800 words, maybe a little more than that. You don't have as much room to do that. I,
Right.
uh,
Right. Just a sentence or two to give you an idea of, this follows this tremendous biography by so and so, or this person who is a professor, or this person who usually writes novels, but here is writing a
right.
memoir, or some sort of context
Yeah.
for the book that's coming out. Just brief.
To contextualize it, especially if it's like a work of fiction,
Right.
where you want to know where it fits in the author's oeuvre. But a work of nonfiction in terms of why the book is coming out now, is it tapping into some controversy? Is the author themselves part of the controversy? Something like that. You
Right.
want to
Yeah.
place the whole matter in front of the reader before you let them know. Well, I don't know. I don't know. Your own reviews tend much more in the Sam direction than in the Steve direction. Once you've set the table for the reader, your own reviews are much more along the lines of, is this worth eternal renown?
Well,
I'm more
I
concerned
tend
with, is this
to
worth your 20?
like to read books that I at least hope will be worth long, not just turning out a review really regularly on something, but something that I think will last, something that I will want to keep on my shelves. Um, yeah,
Speaking
so
of your shelves, do you do a lot of reading of old book reviews?
I do. I I don't read a lot of old book reviews as much as I would like. I have a fair number of volumes, including some out of the library right now, but I read a lot of current reviews, and really love the reviews in the TLS and the London Review of Books and the New York Review of Books. Um, I think that I would enjoy writing longer book reviews. I I've tend to write somewhere, well, I've written some that were 400 words, which I find extraordinarily difficult. Um, some that are the 700 to 800, some that are sort of the 800 to 1,000, which is what I generally do for open letters review, and then some that are in the 1,500 range. And I find all of those from the 800 to 1,500 to fall fairly naturally, but I've never really written something much longer than that, and I'd love to try at some point.
Yeah, you'd probably need time to do it, but you're a natural for
Yes. Well, I need time to even write, the 800 words ones.
it.
Yeah,
I wouldn't know. I write a 350 word review of a book every single day.
yeah, yeah,
Apart from anything I do for the trade journals, I write a 350 word review every single day, at least
yep,
one.
yep,
Apart from what I do for open letters or Steve reads or anything like that.
right.
So I would love to see. I would love to send you a galley copy of something. Maybe not, a new translation of Solzhenitsyn or something, and maybe not something epical, something in your wheelhouse that maybe isn't an eternal book. I would love to send you something like that and specifically challenge you to review it in 300 words. What fun that would be to see what you would do.
Well, I will send you some of the ones that I did in 400. It's cutting out every possible word, using, you know, there's so little you can say.
But what
But
about the book reviews written by uh immortal authors, by people that you know from their mainstream works, like Willa Cather?
Virginia Woolf, yeah.
Well, surely you've read a lot of.
Yeah, yeah. And I always really enjoy them, and often find them um sometimes surprising, but often very different from the way reviews tend to be written today. That often they're a bit more personal than I tend to think I should be writing when I'm putting something out for open letters review.
Yeah.
Um, Occasionally I write one in the 1,500 word ones that they're often a little more personal, that they're more essayistic, not because, I mean, it's because of the venue, not because of the length. And so framing it within that personal, and that seems to harken back, maybe especially to people like Virginia Woolf or Cather, who our personalities so much themselves now that maybe that's why I'm seeing it, that it's maybe less there than in my head of thinking
I don't
that's what
think that's
these.
entirely true. I think it's that they just couldn't repress how individual
Yep.
they, even when they were doing deadline work. I mean, in Virginia Woolf's earliest book reviews, she's writing about, and she writes book reviews, short things for the TLS, but in her journal, she's writing about how I know I just got a box with 5 books in it. I've got to account for every one of them. Uh, Still, does the pieces don't read that way. Same thing with Marianne Moore.
And I've never read hers.
Long before she was an internationally famous poet, she was doing that exact kind of work.
Hmm.
And it shows. It absolutely shows. You
Do you
can
think
tell
women
without
writers
reading
are
that.
more likely to do that than men?
I, I don't know. I don't
Hmm.
think that that's the ultimate dividing line because a lot of these things are so early they weren't signed. So the reader would
Ah,
know. I I I don't think there was a tone to strike. I don't I no, I don't think it's male versus women. I think it's genius versus ordinary people. That's what I think. The really deep, the really smart people cannot repress that.
and those wonderful writers too. I mean, that they're able to make personal discussions seem so much more um, worth reading. Where,
Yes.
often I don't really want to read about the personal lives of most of the people who are reviewing. I want to read what they are thinking about another book. Where people like Wolf and Cather, I want to read about them.
Yeah.
So often more, especially now, reading those, reading back, that I care more about them than I do about the books that they're reviewing in general.
The school of Gonzo, Tom Wolfe, I in a book review, thankfully has largely died. It still exists. You can still get it, especially in the big glossy magazines, but you won't get it in a straightforward venue anymore, thankfully, because it's such a waste of time. I think it has died out not because editors have said, okay, we're going to have more of Sam Sachs and less of John Leonard, but rather that the I type of book reviewing has all just moved to Amazon.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
slightly Amazon and Goodreads, where you open up a review, a so-called review of a new book, of a new Mark Greaney novel, and the person says, I like thrillers set in France. Just don't. Long
Yeah.
story. Don't have time to tell it. Yeah, nobody cares.
Yeah. I mean, I always I always question that statement that which I think you've made several times that when you're writing a review for a professional journal, that the goal is to be critical and not to talk about what you like, and you're that there's something um, true about criticism. And I don't fully buy that, that I really do think that what we like, we need to be critical about what it is that we are responding to. And I know I respond to some things that you might not, or that other readers might not. But if I think critically about what my tastes are, then I could say something that is critically true and that is still personal.
Right. But you can't trespass on the reader's trust, is what I'm saying. And you can't
Yes.
strain their patience. So you can't start off a review by saying, I thoroughly hated this book. But you can end a review that way.
Hmm.
First person pronoun can definitely come in at the end. If you start off your review by saying so and so has 4 Nobel Prizes and the book starts off like this and the whole subject is covered like this and here's an anecdote and here's a footnote and whatnot, and your penultimate paragraph starts with, I found this book almost impossible to read, and had I not been commissioned to do so, I wouldn't have finished it. Well, by then it's going to matter. I guess
Yeah.
my main
Yeah.
problem is starting that way and expecting that the reader is going to care about you
Right.
before
Right.
you taught them to.
Yes. Yes.
I mean, have you ever done that? Have you ever used just indiscriminately, or not indiscriminately, but prominently, a first person pronoun in a review?
Not in a non sort of essay review, that I have in the longer ones. In fact, I'm writing one right now, a little bookish essay that is about rereading. And so I'm looking at one book that I've read 3 different times over the course of my life. And each time, realizing at some point that each time I read it, I was reading another book at roughly the same period. And that other book illuminated some major theme
Wow.
in the book I'm talking about. And so um, in it, because I have to talk about sort of the context of why I read these two together and how that mattered, that I'm a character in it. Although the big point here is not actually to talk about the main book, which is a famous old book, but about the process of books being always in conversation with each other and how that can happen in our own reading of those books. So not just that the books are in conversation with books at the time, but that we ourselves might become aware of those in certain situations when they might not be aware that they're in conversation. I mean, that the authors would not have known.
This
So
piece is this piece for us? Is this for open letters? I want.
no, it's not. And it's not 800 words either. So, but would
What
would
about,
would
the
Open Letters Review ever run something like that? It's not
you
your
wrote it?
say it
You wrote
again
it? Yeah.
if I wrote
This
it.
is this
Thanks.
is akin to the frustration that I feel that I echo from Joe Spivey's video. I don't want to grab and throttle him. Well, I do, of course, want to grab and throttle him. We've all had moments where we wanted to throttle Joe Spivey. But what I want to do is grab and throttle the Fleet Street editors over there in the UK and say, read just one piece by this kid. You're going to kick yourself that you didn't publish him. Someone's going to, and he's going to be beholden to them instead of you. Do you want that? I want to grab these people and say that, but you must have encountered you've mentioned already, all you encounter is phlegmy indifference most of the time. I, how often do you pitch your work?
Um, I haven't in years now.
Oh, you
2 years.
haven't. Okay.
Right. In two
You
years, I've
never,
not pitched anybody new.
okay, so
Um,
dreaming up a new, let's say a new work. Let's say there's a new reprint of Country Appointed Furs,
right. And there is actually.
and you want to write about the book, her works, her life, and all previous editions of that thing. You need a good amount of elbow room to do that. Would you ever pitch that to the London Review? Or, or I don't even know, or New York Review of Books? To be closer. Maybe they wouldn't care about you but in the London Review, but New York Review of Books. Would you ever pitch
TLS?
or the TLS? Sure. Yeah. Would you ever do that? What do you feel when an annoying friend brings up the prospect of pitching that? What are your initial reactions? Is it just, oh God?
No, no, it's actually I, I think that's where I was sort of hoping that I might be able to go at some point when I first started, not first started writing for Open Letters, but after I had done that for a while and pitched a few other places and had a little bit of luck elsewhere, um, that I was sort of hoping, maybe at some point I'll be able to feel comfortable, feel confident in pitching, even if I got no response or whatever. But then stuff in my private life, my personal life, made me back off of that for a while, and I've only sort of started writing again for places other than Open Letters Review very, very recently. Like this one that's in process and one that hasn't been published yet, but I've turned in already and just waiting for their timeline. Um, so I'm not sure that the right book is out right now. The one on Jewett is probably been out too long for a new review. I also sometimes wonder if my background would make me less of an obvious person. I mean, that in general they're gonna those that kind of place is going to look for a reviewer who, wrote their dissertation on a particular author and, not just some
Not
random
the TLS
person who,
is about academic credentials. If you've got academic credentials, they're going to like you.
even if your academic credentials are
Yep.
unrelated to the topic.
Close
So,
enough. You're close enough. You're close enough. You should definitely, for instance, that new Library of America, Margaret Fuller, you should definitely pitch that to them.
Okay, I will do that. It's a beautiful copy. Yeah,
Yeah. And
yeah,
she is not as well known as she should be. Her
right. And maybe
works
especially in the UK. Yeah.
and her works repay infinite revisiting. So that's it's worthwhile there as well. And I don't know what the TLS pays, but it's not going to make the mortgage. It's really for the they value people they can go back to over and over again. They're
Well,
not
that would make me incredibly happy. So,
they're not suited for Joe Spivey. Nor I guess I should say is he suited for them. There are plenty of venues in the UK that are. And
yes.
it's it's maddening because well maybe not in your case, but in a lot of the cases of a lot of people I know, they try it for a while, they get the whole no reply is the new not interested. It only takes a few times being treated that way before you just say, well, I'm not going to bother doing this anymore. I wonder how
Mhm.
many really good voices we're missing.
Right.
The industry is just not responsive to them at all.
Yeah. And I know that I'm somewhat sympathetic because I know that they're incredibly busy, and I know that they don't have the staff to like be nice to everybody, and that, or even to like give people a shot and have to do the extra editing. Someone that they've already worked with, they kind of know how things are going to work. And there's so many people who want to write, and uh, for something that doesn't pay well, and it's kind of funny how uh how many people want to do it.
Well, you're as all of BookTube knows, you're nicer than I am. Because I have heard this story from editors, how if I responded to every single person that sends me an email, I'd be doing emails all day long and nothing else.
Well, if you wrote, a long, oh, thank you so much for this, we appreciate it, and very personal, that might be true, but for just a basic,
Absolutely isn't true. Absolutely not. I had a look at the inbox of the book's editor for the Washington Post years and years and years ago. The very inbox that he said terrorized him to the point where he adopted no reply is the new not interested. And it was not more work than I could have done in a morning. And that's with personal responses. This
yeah,
is a little too long. I read the first 9 paragraphs of this thing, doesn't really fit us. Even with personal responses, it wouldn't have taken me until lunchtime.
yeah,
I don't believe for a minute the standard excuse that the reason we're being so barbarically rude is because we're swamped. I don't believe that at all. I handle
like you're right.
in a
Yeah.
day, and I don't do that. I'm sorry. Just need to,
Well, you have this magical ability to read more and faster and longer hours and write faster and think faster, etc. than and films a zillion booktube videos. And I don't understand how your time works. It's so different
my
from mine.
time is different from many people's, yes, but I'm talking 9 to 5. I live in my inbox, and I just it's frustrating. That's all. So what would you say to viewers who I mean they hear from me all day long about, you know, breaking into book reviewing. What would you say to them about either open letters review or just pitching to the local paper?
Well, even before pitching, I was thinking about Joe Spivey's sort of outline of starting with learning how to procure the books. And first of all, he didn't mention NetGalley, which I think is a fantastic place to be able to get copies
Yeah.
fairly easily, just
Quite
e-copies,
a few
without a huge amount
books
of background or
right?
responsibility. That's a
Quite a few
great
publishers
place
on
to start.
NetGalley that do not require you to have any published work.
Right.
Quite a few of them will just send you this stuff.
Yeah. And as long as you write a little short review for them, nothing formal, not a published work, just on the website, that you'll be able to get more and more. But even before procurement is the idea of figuring out what books are forthcoming.
Right.
And I think that's also a really useful place where NetGalley works. You can choose particular categories that you're interested in.
Right.
My go-to every day or two is the biographies and memoirs category, where because I love reading and writing about biographies of authors and artists, etc. And so, I looked and see everything that's been listed, sometimes coming out in a couple of weeks, sometimes in a few months, and choose one or two
And
periodically.
you don't need we're talking here specifically in context of what you need to do in order for NetGalley to approve you for an e-galley of a forthcoming book, but you don't need anything to look at them to determine what's coming out.
Right,
You can just
right. You
use the
just
site
have to have an
as a
account.
resource. You just have to
Right,
have, right. So
right.
that's a way for you to know.
Yep,
If you use NetGalley and you see something's coming out and you request it and you don't get it, well, you know it's coming out. You can ask me to try and get it.
right, right. Or you can write to publicists. And one way to do that is to, figure out who the publishers are and just request through a general website. But if you're really serious about trying to become a book reviewer, join, at least if you're in the US, joining the National Book Critics Circle, NBCC, um, is a really useful thing because they have um, a couple of spreadsheet type things that list the names of publicists
Right.
and their addresses, as well as the names of all the places, not all, but many, many, many places that run book reviews, and how much they pay and what kinds of word count they want, et cetera. So you can get sort of an idea before you pitch. Um, of course, if you know the place you're pitching to, you've got a much better shot of sounding like you kind of know what you're
Right.
doing. So,
Right. That actually Joe Spivey mentioned that in his video that if you talk with me or with Hannah or any other editor at Open Letters ahead of time, and you clear a book, you say
right,
something's coming out in 2 months. I'd love to write about it for Open Letters, and we
right,
say okay, we will keep everybody else off that title. That is now yours. You can then write to the publisher and say I've been commissioned to review this book.
right. And that
That's
makes a
no longer,
tremendous difference.
it
Yes.
does. That's no longer you saying I'm thinking about it. That's you saying it is going to be run.
Right.
That can make a big difference.
Right. And even if you say it is that you are commissioned to do it, they know that if you hate the book, that it might not happen. So it's not like it's a true promise, but still, yes, if you're much more likely to be taken seriously if you have a commission.
When you mention the National Book Critics Circle, I get a little wistful because we are now on, what is it, year 17 of them simply not being able to figure out whether or not I am a member. Whatever the technological coding snafu was originally when George H.W. Bush was in office, they just can't crack that code. So I will hear from one person who will say, "Oh, yeah, I'm looking at your account right here." I'll look at another person saying, "No, you don't have an account." Absolutely unable to fix it. I've told them many times, I am happy to just have you torch all accounts,
Yeah.
remove me completely, and I'll start over. I'm happy to do that. And they say, "Oh no, that won't be necessary." That's no, you're definitely a book critic.
Yep.
So I'm in a weird, Heisenberg uncertainty principle with them, but they are a great resource for anybody else.
Yes. Yes. And I mean, NetGalley for anybody, whether you've ever written a review or no matter how serious you are, it's free to join. NBCC is maybe $50 a year, something like that. It's not terribly expensive. And to join, you have to show that you've either written a review or written something kind of similar to a review. And I don't think a booktube video would be enough. So you'd have to have already stuck your toes in just a little bit. But that's where Open Letters Review would be a great starting point.
Yes, that's where we come in handy. I have no illusions. We are a starting point,
Yeah.
not an end point.
Yeah.
No, don't get me wrong. I would absolutely love it. I love the idea of people coming to Open Letters and just making it their home,
Yes.
right? Forever. No ambition to go
Which
anywhere else.
which is how I making a little money is always a nice thing. Um, but I still think of, when I read a book and think, oh, I want to review this, my first thought is not, oh, I should go pitch this places and work through the whole deadline, et cetera. It's oh, I want to send this to Open Letters Review that
It's
you're,
the whole process is
so
a little
much more
exciting.
flexible.
Yeah. And the money that you get from enduring the whole process is never all that much.
No,
in
No,
instances. It's never all that much.
right.
Certainly that and the whole rigmarole dealing with editors uh, largely disenchanted me.
And I've had really good luck working with editors. And I mean, you've been the most helpful in the actual editing of the words process, but I've had very kind, once you sort of get someone who says, "Oh yes, we want to hire you for this or commission you for this," I've had great luck with them, and um, you know, I like that I get to uh, use Oxford commas for the open letters review reviews in a way that I have
Well, they
to
should
go
be.
through and try to figure out where they are and take them all out, or things like that for some places that have very strict publication rules where
I
you're
don't
following some
do
style
anything like
book.
that. It's the author's lookout.
Yeah.
If Joe Spivey wants to write his reviews using S's instead of Z's, he's free to do that. Absolutely. I don't. I have gone through. I've done my time in the trenches working at journals where that such a high premium was put on nonsense like that, usually at the expense of whether or not the piece was any good. But I have the exact opposite problem with editors, which is that I don't want them to touch my prose.
Right.
Free to look feel free to look for typos. Do that to your heart's content. But kindly don't sit back in your armchair, stroke your chin, and write back to me and say, I think we might want to play around a little with this paragraph. Thanks very much, Seymour. I was writing this kind of stuff when your parents were in grade school. I already know how to play around with that paragraph.
Yeah. I mean, I've done a lot of writing, but I still feel like I like having somebody else's perspectives, especially when they have, a different way of writing. And especially when I'm writing in a genre that is relatively unfamiliar to me still, even if it feels kind of natural in a sense. I mean, I've been reading book reviews forever, and but but yeah, having a good editor
You
is,
read
I
book
think I will
reviews,
always want a good editor.
you read book reviews regularly now.
Yes, yes. Yeah, actually, my one of my neighbors has